Layovers, your weekly dose of aviation innovation.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard from the flight deck. This is Paul Papadimitriou.
Hello, everybody. This is Alex Hunter.
We'll be your pilots for this show about the news, the startups, and the technologies defining the modern air travel experience. Our flight time today, 1 hour and 40 minutes, and we expect an on-time arrival. Coming up on this flight, Guardia, maybe the worst airport in the US, gets fully rebuilt. Emirates is getting what it wanted, a new Airbus A380. A United pilot ditches live ammunition in the plane toilets. A Chinese consortium buys a 1 billion worth Spanish airport for 10,000 euros. The life of frequent flyer expert Brent Schlappig, who lives in first class all year round. And our guest, Greg Annandale, tells us all about SpaceX and his experience with La Compagnie, the business-only long-haul airline. As we reach our cruising altitude, I'm going to turn off the fasten seatbelt sign for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's turn on those noise-canceling headphones.
Flight 19 to Rio, hello!
Hey, Rio, an airport and, embarrassingly, a continent I've never been to before. I really need to fix that. I know.
Well, I chose Rio because, although it's a summer destination, right now it's the winter, and I kind of plays well with what happens in London currently because it's actually the winter in London right now.
I know, it's ridiculous. It's raining sideways and ugh.
But it's a special episode as well because we have someone else in the cockpit today.
In the cockpit, I like that. Yes, we have my good friend Greg Annandale joining us. Hi, Greg.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure. I've been an avid listener since episode 1, so it's a pleasure to be here.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah, you've actually sent us lots of news. I mean, Alex has been telling me, Greg has told me that, Greg has been telling me that. So thank you so much for being also not only a listener but an active member of our audience.
Absolutely. And Greg is up there when it comes to travel nerdery. Some of the stuff he does and that I've learned from him is pretty impressive. But do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and your travel background?
Yeah, of course. So, I'm a web developer. That's really my primary job. I've been working freelance for near enough 10 years now. And currently I'm working with Co-Club. We're a non-profit based in London. And around that, I've always really just had a love for travel. I've always enjoyed flying from an early age. I was really into all combat aircraft when I was a kid. I used to just memorize all the top trump stats of military aircraft. And I've been playing flight sims all my life, so it's something that's quite dear to me. And really, in the last few years, I've been flying a lot more. That's partly due to my wife being an American. We met in New York. I spend a lot of time heading over there. But also I do some work as a photographer as well. It's more of a hobby than anything. There's a few paying jobs here and there, but it kind of helps fuel my travel. Really, it's a good excuse to get on a plane and go somewhere interesting and take some pictures.
Do you do as well plane photography?
I haven't really done much, actually. I don't really shoot aircraft themselves. I'd like to do photography from aircraft. I have a friend actually who's a pilot near me in the Bristol area, and he's promised to take me up a few times and do some photography. So that would be great.
Wow.
So how many flights have you taken this year? Because you were racking up the miles last time I talked to you.
Yeah, well, this year's actually been a little bit quieter. The first couple of months I was mostly in the US. I didn't really shift from there. So I think I'm only on about 15 or so far. Last year was just crazy. I think I hit 53 last year, which is just a little bit excessive. Most of those are long haul as well.
So can you tell your DVT story?
Yeah. I thought that might come up.
Oh, yeah. Or there's that number 53 is even more impressive when you hear what Greg has to do before every single flight he takes.
So this was December or late November, early December 2012. I had just come back to the UK off a flight from Texas, London Heathrow, and then that same day went on to Prague. And I came off my flight in London just with a little twinge in my left calf. And it kind of felt just like a pulled muscle, nothing more than that. So I thought, well, I'll just stretch it out over a few days and it should go away. And gave it a week, it was still there. 10 days later, I suddenly got really bad. I was out. I just had this shooting pain in my calf, and it felt bizarre. It wasn't just a muscular pain. I could feel it in my ankle and up into my knee as well. And straight away I knew that something wasn't quite right. So I went to ER. I already figured roughly what it was in my head, but I went to ER, had some tests, and they told me I had a blood clot in my calf.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that involved, getting rid of that involved 3 months of treatment on blood thinners, injections, tablets, etc. Not being able to fly, just generally being pretty careful because my blood was obviously thin and wouldn't really clot, so I had to be careful with any outdoor activities, any cycling, that sort of thing. And spent a bit of time with a hematologist just trying to figure out what had happened, because in 2012 I'd flown quite a bit. That was maybe 35 flights, I think, that year. But they said, the specialists I saw just said they couldn't really figure it out. They obviously saw my flying history and noted that I flew a lot, but they said that they usually see DVTs in people with either pre-existing conditions and in terms of flying, usually on London to Sydney, super long flights where people just drink a few gin and tonics, knock themselves out, wouldn't move for 12 hours. So they were kind of surprised. And
so how long could you not fly for after the diagnosis?
So there was only really a 2 or 3 week period where they actually said you really mustn't fly during that period. What actually happened is that once I was on the blood thinners, I had to be tested. My blood had to be tested at least once a week. So it meant that the practicality of not being in the UK again to get to hospital was actually the issue. I technically could get on a flight, but it just wasn't practical to go off to the US for a month or so.
Wow.
So then after that, like I said, they didn't say it was definitely flying that caused it. And I've obviously flown a lot since and I haven't had any issues. But preventatively, the doctors put me on Plexane injections, a blood thinner essentially. So I have to inject before every flight. So it's a belly injection before every flight.
Yeah, you have to do that now every single time.
Yeah.
That is.
I've been there. I was hospitalized when I had a big accident, a ski accident, like more than 15 years ago now, and I had to do that every single day. Actually, I had to inject myself with that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's not the greatest.
Not that fun.
No, it's not.
No. Oh, God. So that is dedication to the art of flying, I would say.
Absolutely.
Well, welcome, Greg. That's quite a story.
I really hope it never happens to me, honestly.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, God. Well, so lots of stories this week. First, a quick shout out to a few friends. There's been a TEDx. I don't know if you guys know what TEDx is. It's a independently produced TED event. A TEDx in an airport in Tokyo, TEDx Haneda, so that international airport. And I was looking at the pictures online. I was so jealous because they were in the hangar of JAWS, so they were having a party next to these big, massive aircrafts. And I'm like, why nobody thought about it before?
Know about this?
No, exactly. So not only I will know for the next time if they do it again, and I will tell you guys, but the second thing is we should do one like this or something, because this is really amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, stories of the first story of the week is just very quickly. During our break, because we haven't had an episode for almost 2.5 weeks now, there was the first anniversary of the MH17 crash. So there was a lot of course, stuff had happened. We don't want to talk too much about it. There's been some new developments in the story. Apparently, really, it seems that somebody truly shot that plane. Was it on purpose or not? It doesn't look like it. It looks like it was, they thought they were shooting another plane, but still, it's a sad day. We're still not sure what exactly happened, but we just wanted to say that we're thinking about the families and everybody who was involved in that crash.
Yeah.
Moving on to a story which came up already many times before in our show. Actually, came up in the first ever show we had since Greg has been listening. It's the A380neo. You want to take that one, Alex?
Yeah, Airbus have finally come out and said that they are committed to this new re-engined, re-aerodynamically designed version of the A380. They've finally come out. They've ended, almost a year of speculation that will they, won't they. Emirates had put massive pressure on them to really make the airplane more efficient. Obviously, Emirates are huge fans of it. They have 150 of them. Actually, there are only 300 planes ordered, and Emirates account for over half of that. And they've just announced that Gatwick is going to be all A380. So they're going to have 5 dailies to Heathrow and 3 dailies to Gatwick, all 380. So that's over 4,000 available seats per day coming from London.
Wow.
Which is an extraordinary endorsement to the platform. But they say that they could launch this as early as 2020. So it sounds like it'll be a very aggressive redevelopment of this airplane. So they haven't gone into the specifics of other than the re-engineering and some optimization of the flight profile of what else they're going to do. But it will be interesting to see if anybody else jumps on this. And I think for Airbus's sake, I hope they do, because it's going to cost them over $3 billion to do this.
Yeah, and actually, we said on episode 001 that Emirates wanted to buy 100 A380neos. Then they went and said, oh, we'll actually buy 200 of them. That was in episode 007. And I remember when we talked about Tim Clark's interview in the IFE of Emirates in episode 14, he said that, the new airport at Dubai will cater for 250 million passengers a year eventually. So meaning that probably they will even have to buy more of these. So basically, they are driving that program by themselves. I mean, I'm not sure anyone, because no one has ordered any of these
for a long time. It'll be interesting to see if other big operators like Qantas, Singapore Airlines jump on this as well. And if they had also themselves been asking for a newer, updated version, more efficient version of the A380, but they didn't have the purchasing clout to get Airbus to actually do it. So now that they've committed, it'll be interesting to see if the orders start trickling in.
Yeah, and the one noticeable thing is that Airbus seemingly says that there won't be an option between two different engines. They want to go with a single engine, a single option, I guess, to reduce costs of development, also to reduce flying tests, because you don't have to run two programs of testing at the same time if you have a single engine to test for.
Which I guess explains the slightly compressed development time too.
Yeah, and there's a rumor though, but I mean, again, like there's no specifics, that there are a possibility to look into having up to 1,000 seats in an all-economy setting in the new A380. I don't know if that's true or not.
No, thank you. You mentioned the toilets. Good God.
Greg, have you ever flown the A380?
Yeah, a few times. I've flown, let me think. It was beginning of last year. I flew to Singapore and to Melbourne as well, 2 separate trips. And then again later last year, I went to Bangkok and return trip to Bangkok. That was it. So yeah, a few times.
Mostly, was it on Emirates?
Emirates and Qantas. Yeah.
Qantas, yeah. I've never flown the Qantas one.
Actually, the Qantas one is interesting. There's a good little tip. It's kind of like the Virgin 747 tip of get yourself up in the on the top deck.
Absolutely.
There's a rear upper deck economy Qantas A380s, which is worth knowing. It's even smaller than the Virgin 747 upper deck, and there's a full width exit row as well. So even if you sit in the 4 seats in the middle, you have a huge amount of legroom.
Nice. That's a great.
That's really a very good tip. Oh wow. Yeah. Oh, nice.
It's a really good spot. So yeah, right at the back of the plane, and there's, I can't remember exactly, but there's something like 20 odd seats. It's not big.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, Emirates doesn't have any. Emirates is only first and business class on top. They don't have premium economy. Which by the way, don't you think, guys, that they should at some point introduce premium economy on Emirates?
It makes
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about it later because I have a few news about these aircraft. But I want to continue on aircraft because there was one thing that I think I told on this show, or if not, you'll know. I always wanted to do the longest flight ever, a commercially available flight, was Singapore was flying from Newark to Singapore. They stopped this service in November 2013, if I remember correctly. It was an 18 and a half hours flight. So that was why I wanted to fly it, because 18 and a half hours. They stopped it because it was not economically viable. It was an old business setting. There was only like 200 seats or something, or everything business. It was not economically viable, but there was a piece of news I read the other day on Lehman News, which is always a very, very good source of information, which said that apparently there might be an A350-900 long range in development, which actually could reignite that route for Singapore. Wow. So I really hope it happens, because right now, basically what happens is that on the previous route, they had to fly a 4-engine airplane, and that wise it was not economically feasible. Whereas the A350-900LR, which means long range, is a 2-engine airplane. So I really hope they make it.
That I've done LA Hong Kong, because the other route they used the A340-500 on for these ultra long hauls was LA Singapore. I've done LA Hong Kong, and that was the most excruciating thing I've ever done. This was like in the 90s on Cathay in business class, and it was great. I mean, that's fine, but you sleep for 8 hours, you still have another 8 hours left. And this might have been an urban legend, but I feel pretty confident in saying this. On the Singapore A340-500s, they had a place designated to store a body. Because if you're flying across the Pacific Ocean and someone dies halfway across, you've got nowhere to put it. So there was a place that was designed to take a body. If anyone wants to challenge me on that, if you listen and you're like, I know for a fact that's true or not true, please let me know. But I feel pretty confident that it's true.
Oh, it could be. Out of pure tidbit, the current longest flight, if anyone is interested, is Qantas from Sydney to Dallas. And I think that Emirates from Dubai to LA is not far behind. So
yeah, those have got to be long flights.
Yeah, if you want to do long flights like I want, I've not done any of these two either. I really want to do once, although it must be really painful. But I really want to do it once. Talking about like incredible stories, Greg, you witnessed actually something that's not exactly talking about commercial aircraft, but SpaceX. Can you tell us a story about that?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to be invited along to NASA's SpaceX CRS-7 mission. SpaceX, I'm sure most, if not all, your listeners are familiar with. And so they are currently running resupply missions to the ISS, and that's all organized through NASA. So NASA will basically pay SpaceX to do them and will help provide the facilities. They have a lot of free launch pads and infrastructure, obviously. So NASA Social have been organizing events for quite a while. I think they've done about 100 events now. And the general idea is that they wanted to introduce NASA to more people than just the professional media. So they've been inviting people, mostly those involved in social media, for a while. And this event, a little while back, a few weeks ago, was the first time that they invited foreign nationals to one of these social events. And the premise is it's all organized around a certain launch, whether that's a satellite launch or an ISS launch. In this case, like I said, ISS and SpaceX. And they just spend 3 or 4 days just opening up as much as they can. It was the Kennedy Space Center specifically that we had access to. And they were really just trying to open up as much as possible to show us what goes on in NASA specifically for this launch, but also just to give us an idea of the history of NASA. So we were able to see some of the facilities where the tiles were manufactured that were used on the shuttle, for example, and to speak to some of the QA engineers on the shuttle program, all the way through to people working on the very kind of bleeding edge of space travel at the moment.
So you were getting access to places that the public definitely doesn't go.
Yeah, exactly. So we were taken around to the ISS facility where the Kennedy Space Center is basically where everything comes together and then they launch it. So there's not all that much manufactured there from what I can understand, but it's the assembly structure essentially. So it's where the shuttle was put together, and it's where a lot of the space station components were put together before being placed into the shuttle for launch. Wow. So we got a lot of access to see the facility as well that takes place, and obviously the launch facility as well.
And this launch didn't go 100% according to plan, right?
It didn't. No, I mean, using their terminology, it was a non-nominal flight, which is
non-nominal flight.
One way of putting
I'm so going to use that in everyday conversation.
So Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously, hugely unfortunate to all those involved. Fortunately, though, I mean, no casualties. They're unmanned flights, taking provisions to the space station along with science experiments and other pieces of equipment. But just under 2 minutes into flight, there was an issue that was actually only the cause of it was only really revealed in the last week or so. So Elon Musk has been tweeting out about this. They've had engineers looking into this for the last few weeks. And one of the struts, the internal struts, failed in the second stage. So at the point where the first stage was supposed to separate, just before that point, a strut failed, and one of the helium canisters basically came loose and caused depressurization, and there was essentially a large gaseous explosion.
Wow.
At about, I think it was about 45 kilometers into the air. We could actually see it from where we were. So
You could
we
see
were
it.
about we're about 4 miles from the launch pad, which sounds pretty far. And as rockets go, it's a small one. They all refer to it as a baby rocket. But I mean, we could see it well up into 30, 35, 40K in the air. And obviously, most of what we're seeing are the trails and some of the output from the rocket engines. But we could just about make out a cloud of gases. And it looked like it was a first stage separation, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Wow. So if people wanted to see some of the photos you took and the other stuff that you documented, where would they be able to see that?
So I've been posting a few bits on Instagram, Greg_A on Instagram. But I've actually put together a photo story, sort of a journal of the trip there on Exposure. So that's exposure.co. And I'll send you guys a little link to put in the show notes.
Great. Yeah, please do.
Oh, that's a great, it's a great site, exposure.co. I have a website. It's very nice to create portfolios, and yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I love it. And the guys behind it are great as well. They've been involved in the web industry for a long time. They do great work. So I would highly recommend it as well.
So going back to Earth, because I mean, space flights are still a bit science fiction, although we know that Virgin Galactic is trying to sell us that we're going to do that, and I'm sure Alex would be on the first flight. But getting back, we just mentioned the story about the A380, the new A380, and linked to that, of course, as always, is kind of the Europe versus the US in terms of manufacturers, but also obviously the eternal saga, which is the US versus the Middle East when it comes to carriers. And one interesting story that I hadn't picked up in the past few weeks is that, I don't know if you guys know the Export Import Bank. It's basically a credit agency that helps countries that want to buy American products then give a credit line, right? And it was supposedly originally created for countries which had difficulties to get access to credit to help them buy American products. But obviously, the reason I'm mentioning that here is that it's one of the programs that's being used by Emirates, for instance, to buy Boeing airplanes, to the point that some people call this Export-Import Bank the Boeing's Bank, because it helps Boeing sell aircraft. Actually, Europe has a similar credit agencies, actually, so that's not only American. But the interesting bit is that they have been blocked by Senate, basically by the Congress. They couldn't operate anymore. And it was a bit of war behind the scenes, because some of the people that actually blocked its renewal, its license renewal, were basically claiming that it was helping these carriers too much.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, Emirates gonna reply that, guys, we don't need it. They use, I think, the credit line in the past 2 or 3 years for $3 billion. It's a credit line, right? It's not just free money, but because obviously Emirates has access to credit. But it's interesting to follow, because we'll talk a little bit later in the show about still this saga. So this is blocked for the moment. It goes to Senate, I think, this week, actually. And it's interesting because it's really, I think Boeing now is pushing a lot to try to get the license of this.
I would imagine that's pretty important for them to have that resolved quickly.
Yeah, because countries like Ethiopia have been using it. These are countries that I'm guessing have harder time getting access to credit in the market. So they need that kind of agency to be able to buy, in this instance, planes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, so we mentioned in episode 17 that United was not going anymore to JFK, and we'll to talk a little bit about New York's airports now. And one of the biggest pieces of news of this week was that the worst airport in the US, probably LaGuardia, is going to be torn down and completely rebuilt. Are you rejoicing?
This is fantastic. I've only flown into LaGuardia once, but I don't think you'd find anybody in the world that would disagree when you say it's just a joke. That airport is so bad. And the fact that they're just saying, yeah, we're just going to knock the whole thing down and start again is, I think, validation of that criticism.
And I'm so happy because you know what? I know for those who listen to this show, and I apologize sometimes for it, I'm a bit harsh with US airports. But this is because it's the first time that you can hear that they will actually say, you know what? We're just going to destroy it and start it all over again. It said, actually, the Mayor Cuomo said, it's not a plan, it's not a sketch, it's not a dream, it's not a vision, it's actually happening. And I love it because it sometimes feels in the US that, they build some stuff on top and they refurbish some parts of airports. But this is a massive plan. And the renderings, I'll put some links in the show notes, are pretty cool. It looks like a really good airport, honestly, now, if they get to do that, the plan they're actually trying to.
Yeah, the timeline is really impressive too. They think they're going to have it done by 2021. That's not a long time to completely rebuild an airport.
Yeah.
And the renderings that they have, it looks quite a lot like the way that the Philadelphia airport is laid out, with a long kind of causeway running through the middle, and then piers of of gates coming out from the I think I basically described every airport in the world, but it does look quite a lot like Philadelphia Airport. So it's great. It's great. And the fact that I'm sure they ran into very little opposition to the necessity for this, and I hope that it continues to be smooth sailing for them.
It was funny that on the press event they invited Joe Biden because Joe Biden said last year that LaGuardia, he compared LaGuardia to a third world country airport.
Yeah.
So that was, which tells you, even if the vice president says that this airport is so bad, it means that it was really bad. So I'm happy that they're rebuilding. Talking about, still talking about New York, JFK, I think you mentioned, Alex, in episode 12 that JetBlue was looking into that very famous building of the TWA building to make it as an hotel. And actually, that's true. It's going to be a hotel. Apparently, the plans have been proposed, and it looks. There's barely some renderings now. That is good news.
This is great news, and I am glad that JetBlue got it because I think they will look after it. They're based at JFK, and I think they have a vested interest in maintaining it. I'm glad also, having read a few of the articles that we've been passing back and forth about the subject, that there is such a strong interest from conservationists, and especially architectural conservationists, to preserve as much of at least the spirit and uniqueness of this building. And it really is a wonderful building. In any development, they will be required to do so. So that is hugely reassuring to me that this is going to be a project.
Part of the architects are actually the ones who did the Highline Hotel, and the Highline Hotel used to be a building that was also protected, and they did a great job into maintaining the structure, maintaining the spirit of it. So I'm happy to hear that these are the guys who actually will redo this TWA because they have respect for what is existing. By the way, Greg, if you like photography, this is really a building you should try to get into because that is absolutely fantastic.
It's you're familiar with the building, Greg?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I need to give it a shot.
It's such a beautiful building, and I'm glad. I think that of all of the options that was proposed for this structure, including knocking it down, which would be a crime. I think this is the best because it will get used.
Yeah, exactly. It will get used. And Greg, if you don't have access, we mentioned, I think it was at our last show, that JetBlue's new lounge will have a direct view on it. So at least you can, on the rooftop, so at least you can take pictures from there, which is, cool. Good enough, probably.
Yeah, and it's a nice terminal as well. I've flown into it, actually, mostly with Aer Lingus, actually. I do the old flight through Dublin and arrive in the US having pre-cleared customs, which is great.
Oh, and they go into the JetBlue terminal when they do that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
so nice. That's a great facility.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Because my experience with JFK is not always that great. I mean, this is an airport we'll cover one day because there's a lot to say. It's a great airport and it's a bad airport at the same time. But
Yeah.
apparently, so the plan we just heard from Cuomo about LaGuardia is part of the bigger plan of pushing the entire. I think it's called Reimagining New York or something, and it's calling to not only there will be also a grand master plan for JFK that will revealed at some point. They also. I mean, they're trying because there's a lot of stuff that could be done for JFK as well. It's not the best airport in the world. Talking about airports in the U.S., we talked about the collusion that might happen. So it's a debate if there's collusion or not. That's a big debate. That's the Department of Justice in the U.S. will look at it. One interesting article I found about on that topic is that it shows that there's more and more concentration. I don't know because you guys fly in the U.S. So there's more and more concentration in the U.S. in terms of how many airlines are in a single airport. It used to be much more diverse, and it looks like now their airports are more and more duopoly. So they have two airlines versus four in the past, which tend to show that there's a lot of consolidation, but also might hint at less competition at some point. Because if you fly from an airport because that's your home airport and there's no other possibilities that these two, or even in some cases a single airline, that's not much of a competition. Have you seen that, guys?
Absolutely. I think if you look at all of the major airports, you refer to one of the big airports as so-and-so's hub, Miami, American Airlines hub, Chicago, United Airlines hub, Dallas, another American Airlines hub, Denver. Actually, Denver is a bit of a hotly contested market right now, but
yes, it is.
Phoenix, U.S. Airways, Charlotte, U.S. Airways, Philadelphia, U.S. Airways. So yeah, and then you have bit part players around the rest that are just going there because they kind of need to. But yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes hand in hand, although cannot be proven to be related to the allegations of possible collusion that we've covered in previous episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned Denver because I think on the numbers, Denver is one of the only airports currently in the U.S. where airline fees have dropped a little bit. On the other airports, the price of your ticket has been increasing. So, competition drives prices down.
Yeah, and that's kind of the front line for competition, and everybody seems to throw everything at that. It was Frontiers and Denver's, and now Southwest have thrown a lot of time and energy into it. So, but this is going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next 5 years, whether we're going to actually have to re-regulate or do something to stop the consolidation.
Yeah, actually, there was an article in Skift that said that was really interesting about that. What would it take to actually prove collusion? And of course, there was in the past the Department of Justice investigations, and of course, it was very clear because there were clear remarks or phone calls that were recorded where airline executives clearly actually said something about collusion. This time, it's not that clear, but there's this word that keeps coming back, which I kind of like. It's called capacity discipline, which is basically, well, you try to get in line and not to add too much seat capacity. So you kind of, it's not, I mean, no one can say it's collusion per se, but the fact that you don't try to eat your competitor means that discipline means that you're basically happy with the status quo. It remains to be seen if there is talks, in the behind the scenes that can be construed as collusion, but that's, I mean, the numbers are in. The numbers of capacity increase in this year, next year will be paltry.
And so many a lot of the big U.S. airlines announced their quarterly results, and some of them their annual results yesterday, and we're talking billions of dollars of profits. So there's something not quite right here.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been, apparently there's an email. Nobody has actually the content of the email, at least that I know of. There's been an email, I think from an executive in AA that apparently hints at something. There's also other remarks like, oh, this other airline should be, put back into its own place. Like don't be too aggressive, guys. It's interesting. We'll see what happens. But there was one number about that was really staggering because you just mentioned prices. We know that, for instance, oil prices have come down, but ticket prices, at least the surcharge, has not come down. And there's one number that I found staggering that will drive Alex mad. In 2007, airlines collected $2.45 billion in non-fare receipts. So basically all the airline fees it was worth 2.45 billion in 2007. In 2014, that was $38 billion.
That is criminal. That is staggering that we have allowed them, because there's no way that correlates with passenger growth. It's impossible. So that we have allowed them to increase all of these ancillary fees by that order of magnitude in a space of 7 years.
Greg, have you ever had issues with? I mean, obviously you don't like paying these airline fees like we all do, but have you actually encountered places where you found they were actually really unfair to you because you travel in the US or not?
I wouldn't say I have, actually. I mean, they've always seemed excessive, but I can't say that anything has necessarily been stood out to me as being particularly unfair.
It's gotten to the point where we kind of like we expect them. We know that they're there. They're just part of flying life now, and it's just tragic.
Actually, I think it's a business model that the ticket fee is the lowest possible one, and then you add everything you want on top. So you want a better seat, you want more leg room, you want food, you want luggage, you want this, you want that, you want headphones. Soon, maybe like Ryanair's O'Leary, you want access to the bathroom, you'll have to pay for it or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess it comes with the territory. I think it's interesting, though, that a lot of articles in the US say that US airlines have actually copied what European airlines are doing. It's interesting. Like EasyJet and Ryanair obviously are the ones that they're thinking about. But,
it just takes one airline to introduce a new fee. They wait 6 weeks, and then everybody else jumps on it.
Just on it. There was a few. By the way, talking about unfairness, there was a few articles. One was really funny because this guy was offered to upgrade his seat, and the seat had no window, and like they had him for like another fee, and he's unhappy about it. Other people, there's a lot of. This is what I meant by unfair. I mean, and the airline wouldn't budge. He said, "Oh, there was no window. It's not our fault." Like, yeah, you offer me an upgrade of my seat to go more in front of the plane. There's no window, and you tell me that's okay, or there's no recline, or et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, talking about fees, another way to help when we try to get our lowest price. Alex, you mentioned many times that one of the ways to do that was to play with a hidden city, but apparently you read something that BA is cracking down on that.
Yes, so a hidden city is when you purchase a fare that has a layover in it, but you have no intention of really taking the whole fare. So, for example, you could do London, or let's say, let me think of a good example. Okay, so Dublin, San Francisco, Dublin will be cheaper than London, San Francisco, London because of all those silly fees that we get lumbered with as Brits. If you found one of those fares and you found that the flight went London, Dublin, San Francisco, London, Dublin, but you lived in London and you didn't take that last leg from London to Dublin, but you're going, oh, great, I saved £300. Well, the airlines don't like it when you do that. So they try and threaten you with things like they will cancel your return flight. So obviously you don't want to do this halfway through your journey. It's only when you're coming back. Avoiding your frequent flyer rewards or anything that you would have earned. And I've also heard reports of people having their entire status. So if you're a gold card holder, removed for doing this because it's technically against the contract of carriage. These guys, British Airways, apparently, allegedly, are going to start issuing bills for you to pay the difference in the fare.
Oh my God.
Now, I think this is ridiculous because, and it's not just BA, every airline does this. They created this problem in the first place.
Correct. Yeah.
By having all of this total disparity in fees. And you read the feedback from the articles that were covering this particular issue, and it's universal scorn on the airlines saying, you know, why should it be illegal to get off your flight midway? Carriers, stop ripping the customer off, and this will stop. Get a grip. You created this one. If you want to fix it, then eliminate it. Going after the passenger is going to create nothing but a PR train wreck.
I think it also highlights the fact that pricing just is in no way linked to distance traveled or to the service itself. It's really linked to a whole other set of factors that it's clear that you're essentially saving them money because you're not getting on that last flight, but that never gets factored into the pricing.
Yeah. I think what created the whole thing for BA, they're running currently, and I think you had sent me, Alex, one of these fairs because there are websites and forums you can find these crazy fairs. They are actually currently running a program where it's very cheap to fly from Germany to, I think, Asia or something, and it's much cheaper to fly there than to fly from London. And they're trying to make it hard for people to cheat, and if they say it's because they want to fight the Middle Eastern airlines. I don't know, but
that's
anyway.
not. I think that's not the passengers' problem.
I agree.
It's frustrating. I don't think I've heard a good answer to this, and I think it shows the anachronistic structure of airline fares and the way that they're priced. So it's a very frustrating thing.
Talking about one of the airlines that I really don't like, United. I'm sorry, I keep talking about United as an airline that I don't like. But there were some remarks by the CEO that were pretty funny, Alex, right?
Yeah, this is bizarre, absolutely bizarre. And this was in Corporate Travel magazine. And he spoke about a few things that I think kind of piqued both of our interests. He said initially that they think that they're going to eliminate their international first class product, which actually might, I think you said this, Paul, makes some instance in some cases, or makes sense in some instances because it doesn't make money for them. They will not be retrofitting it to their older airplanes. It takes a lot of real estate and people aren't willing to pay for it. But in the same breath, the Etihad residence, which is $36,000 from New York to Abu Dhabi, Etihad to come out and say, it's a huge success and we wish we had more of them. So I don't know who's right. I'm guessing Etihad. He made another comment in the same, this is the CEO of United, on the A380, and I love this. He said, quote, "That is a product for state-subsidized airlines, or airlines that have it and wish they didn't." So that was obviously aimed in the Middle Eastern carriers, but he would not have made friends with his Star Alliance partner, Singapore Airlines, or Qantas, or anybody else that has the A380 who does not wish to be associated as a subsidized airline. So a bizarre, childish statement.
But then again, United is one of the airlines that have really absolutely no ties with the Middle East. I mean, we know that American has some ties with the Etihad. I mean, the other airlines might have, as part of their alliance. United is very lonely there, so maybe that's why he's shouting that much.
And they keep making crazy decision after crazy decision. First, the whole we're going to leave JFK all of a sudden in its entirety. Then all this weird kind of gesticulation from the pulpit. I don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're abandoning their passengers and all kind. And then this little story that I stumbled upon. The Aviation Herald, avherald.com, is a great website for if you're really into aviation. It's quite detailed and technical, but that's not a bad thing. Apparently, on the 24th of June, a 767, United 767, flying from Houston to Munich, the captain disposed of bullets down a toilet. And it says, was en route when the captain disposed of 10 bullets in his possession into the toilet. That's staggering for somebody who's competent enough, and I'm sure he or she was perfectly.
I think she. I think the story was that she forgot to do that before taking off, and it's forbidden to bring live ammunition in Germany, and she knew that she would have been caught. So instead of having to file a report, she just decided to dump them in the toilets, which obviously then created a massive problem because I think the plane had to be secluded, and then some fire brigade had to kind of look at the waste disposal, et cetera, et cetera.
They had to empty the waste tanks and find all 10 bullets.
It's a nice job.
I hope that they made the pilot do that. Extraordinary.
And that's to add up on the other problems. I mean, that's a small story, but they add up on the other problems that United has been having in the past weeks. Actually, to the point that two major outlets, Bloomberg was one, called this United hell because they had, you remember we were actually having the show when suddenly all the planes were grounded because apparently some router was faulty. There's been the stories about people being abandoned in barracks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. and but sadly, maybe so. You can't argue. That's the quote. Actually, you can't argue with stock price performance, and even though all these problems happen, the stock keeps rising. And why would you replace a CEO like the one we just mentioned if the stock price is still rising?
That's the delicious irony of capitalism, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
You're right. I mean, they've been pouring in great numbers. I think that there was about 3 or 4 years ago quite a lot of pressure on the current CEO due to stock prices, but as everybody else is doing, they're posting record numbers. Oil prices are low, and as you say, why rock the boat, even if your passengers hate you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they still have, and interestingly enough, almost contradictorily, we mentioned that they've been pushing for some new clubs, so new lounges in the world. So they actually are investing. There's also been a story on a designer that they've actually invested in new amenity kits. So they're in a premium class. They've actually offering better products, like almost. I mean, when you look at the amenity kits, they almost look like this Middle Eastern they keep complaining about. I mean, it's really unique. So it's. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the airline because of the passenger experience, because they've always had problems with it. Although I have status in Star Alliance and I start to avoid them. I would love for them to prove me wrong. Although I'm not sure they will eventually. Well, one of the things they also have an issue with is like unions. So they have been unable to reach a conclusion to their negotiation with their flight attendants union, and the same thing is actually happening for Delta. And Delta, it's something I don't know. I wanted to have your take, Alex, because Delta basically said that they were canceling an order or $4 billion worth of aircraft to Boeing and Embraer just because they were not able to reach an agreement with the union. What do you think about this?
I think it's a real shame for Delta as well as it is for Boeing and Embraer. And I wonder how much of this is posturing in the broader disagreement with their unions, but also I think it shows the clout that aviation unions have in the U.S. I know that Southwest are having a massive years-long protracted battle with their flight attendants union, and it's causing them to kind of really lose sight of the more important things like passenger experience. But it's gotten to the point where it's getting a little bit ridiculous, and this is only going to get worse with consolidation.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Talking about Delta very quickly, because we've been tracking that story. Apparently, Delta is eyeing to buy a stake in Skymark, which is that Japanese airline, which was close to bankruptcy. The one who had bought the A380 but couldn't actually buy them in the end. Interesting. It seems that they're okay to expand internationally there, as long as it's not in the Middle East or something. Talking about unions, back to Europe. So unions have been also an issue with Air France. I used to fly Air France a lot. So Air France has this particular, you have to understand Air France. Air France has this particular model. I'm not talking about unions, I'm talking about the model. It's a feeder model. So Air France has been highly protective of its own market. And the model is basically bring all the small planes to Paris, and from Paris you fly everywhere in the world. That's always been the motto from Air France. And both the pilots and the unions, both the management and the unions are still kind of stuck on that model, which is why, coming back to, remember we talked about the low-cost Transavia, this is why it's going nowhere, because the unions are fighting, and also kind of the management is fighting against it, because they still dream of that model of having the feeder, so the towards Paris. So there's been a lot of problems with that. But interestingly enough, although I say that, recently Air France has kind of expanded its code share with Etihad. So coming back to what we said before about the US airlines, it seems that American Airlines is kind of okay with Etihad. Air France KLM is kind of opening up with Etihad. Alitalia, it could have been triggered by the fact that Alitalia kind of decided not to renew its partnership agreement with Air France KLM. It started refocusing on Italy. But still, they're kind of being opening up to, which is why I mentioned before, Lufthansa United seems to be kind of lonely now because they don't have anyone to talk to in the Middle East.
Yeah, they're really kind of isolating themselves. But isn't Alitalia, don't they have investment from...
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's what I don't understand. So I went and I looked for it. So Alitalia is, Air France KLM did buy a stake in Alitalia. The other, of course, Etihad has been bought a big stake in Alitalia. But if you go on the corporate website from corporatealitalia.it, As the piece of news dates from May, it says Alitalia today announced that it will not renew its partnership agreement with and joint venture agreements with Air France KLM by 2017.
So that's interesting. So Etihad buys 49% of Alitalia on the 1st of January, and then a few months later they say they're not going to renew with Air France KLM. So I'm pretty sure those things are not unrelated.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Still talking about Etihad. Etihad has agreed to sell its stake in Aer Lingus. So basically, Aer Lingus is now kind of okay because Ryanair said yes as well. I mean, they're kind of forced, but they said yes. So that story seems to be coming.
That's a pretty much a done deal now. All of the roadblocks seem out of the way. The government stake in Aer Lingus, Ryanair massively grudgingly said that they would sell their stake. So I think that's just a formality now that Aer Lingus is part of the ever-growing IAG portfolio of airlines.
Yeah, it's not about airline. I mean, Greg, you mentioned you flew them. How are they? Because I've never flown them.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, it's not a remarkable service. It works. For me, it was really convenient. As I said, I've been using to fly to New York from Bristol, and the stopover in Dublin is ideal just because of the US pre-clearance. It just makes it so much nicer. I mean, flying to JFK the last few years and then arriving late at night and then having an hour, 2 hours, sometimes even up to 3 hours of queues for immigration is just the worst. So actually pre-clearing in Dublin was really a breath of fresh air. However, I have to say that as of earlier this year, JFK and a number of major US airports have implemented much, much better immigration systems.
It really is way better in
so
the brief experiences that I've had.
Yeah, they've introduced these kind of electronic kiosk, when everything is basically a touchscreen experience. Last time I was in New York was that. It was much faster, indeed.
And they separate out first-time Esters versus returning Esters. So if you're returning, the process is faster. You go through the machine, as you say, that takes maybe 30 seconds, and then you have a quick interview, and then you're straight through. I've been through like 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. So that's great.
Exactly. Me too. I was really staggered. That's a very, very big improvement in New York. And I mean, I'm sure in other airports in the US, but that's a huge improvement. Though I would really welcome pre-clearance in the UK too.
Well, it's coming, isn't it?
Yes, it's coming. Yeah. You're right, actually, Alex. It's coming, actually. Yeah, finally.
And
Abu Dhabi has it.
Of course. And the Aer Lingus have transatlantic Wi-Fi now, don't they, on their A330s?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Not many airlines have that.
Yeah, I mean, I really have no complaints with the service. With the price, the convenience, as I said, with the pre-clearance especially, it's fine. It's really nothing to write home about, but I'm quite happy with what I've got for what I've paid.
Interestingly, actually, talking about competition, Etihad has actually said that they won't actually add any new routes to the US in the next 24 months. That's
quite a statement.
Yeah, it's quite a statement. If you compare that to what Emirates and Qatar are doing, it's they seem to be expanding and trying to buy stakes of other airlines around. I guess that's their main strategy, and maybe also they kind of give it as a gift of goodwill to the US, probably because they may be planning something with American Airlines. I don't know.
Good point.
But there was an article in The Economist I really like. It was an op-ed, and it said that if America was really serious about the issue of competition, it could deal with it with a stroke. Open up the domestic aviation market to foreign competition, allow Ryanair, Emirates, and the like to fly whichever routes they want.
Oh, yeah. Game over.
Not only game over, but that would be actually really interesting. And the same should apply actually in Europe. I would love to see that. But talking about Ryanair, so Ryanair did two things that were staggering, as usual. We're used with the Ryanair. The first one is that Ryanair declared that sites like Expedia, so these flight comparisons websites that you might use, make no sense and shouldn't exist. O'Leary actually called, but interesting because up to that point you say, wait, whatever. But then O'Leary said, okay, in order to disrupt these kind of price comparison websites, what we should all the websites, so British Airways, Iberia, Air France, KLM, Lufthansa, EasyJet, should display each other prices.
What?
Yes, he actually said that. He said, okay, you can actually put, of course he knows because he's very cheap. We put each other prices on our own websites, thus we destroy the flight comparison websites. I don't know about that. Yeah. But the other thing was staggering that Ryanair did, they actually, so they were they pulled out of an airport in Denmark because the Danish authorities accepted that the unions could strike. So they said, okay, you don't want us, we're just leaving. What do you think about that?
That's typical Ryanair hyperbole, isn't it? It's always the nuclear option. There's no kind of finesse or subtlety with them.
Yeah, absolutely none. So the airport, if you're interested, is Billund, which is where the big Lego land is built. So if you have kids, you cannot go with Ryanair now because Ryanair has pulled out of the country entirely, waiting for this to be resolved. Talking about an airport another airport that we covered is very cheap is Ciudad Airport. Why didn't we buy it, Alex?
I don't know why we didn't buy it. Now that I've seen the price, so this is the airport we've spoken about a few times over the show, which is a ghost airport. It cost billions of euros to make, probably almost all taxpayer money, in a remote part. I think the nearest major city was Valencia, and it was still hours away from that. No commercial flight ever landed there. I think we said that the markings were wrong, so the airplanes couldn't turn properly. It was just sold to a Chinese investment group for 10,000 euros. That's 7,000 pounds. There was one bidder. Pardon me, south of Madrid, in between Madrid and Valencia. So they're going to make it an entry point for Chinese companies coming into Europe. I'm not 100% sure what that means, if it's going to be a cargo airport or something like that. But that's staggering. I don't even understand how that happens. But the crazy thing is, this isn't the only ghost airport in Spain.
No, you remember there was the other one we mentioned. It was the Ciudad Real Central or something.
Yeah, Castellon.
I think this is where Top Gear did that episode. They were running on the track, right? I think this one also has no flights or something. Well, maybe one or something.
Yeah. They have like one or two, but this is another $1 billion airport. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, these are politicians that want to boast or something. Isn't that the one, by the way, the one you just mentioned? Is that the one that had a big statue in front of it or something?
I think so, yeah. I mean, these are attractive airports. They're well made, and it's a boondoggle of the first order. But yes, it's been bought. I have no idea what they're going to do with it. It's very vague. But,
but $10,000 is really like a bargain, right?
Change, right?
They tried to sell it down from 1 billion to 40 million euros, and still no one wanted to buy it. So
they said, we're going to have to invest a little bit of money to get it going. But it's like, you know what? With $10,000 purchase price, you got a little bit of change to play with.
We should have outbidded them and record the show from there, Alex.
Yeah, from our own airport.
Yes, exactly. I would have done my house there. Just look at the runway every morning. That's the best look in the world. Last episode, the airport was Athens, and I just wanted to quickly mention this because it's kind of ironic with all that happens in Greece. The biggest tax evader in Greece is the company that runs the airport. Mm-hmm. They have not paid VAT for more than 20 years.
What?
So which is probably €500 million or something. And if you and all the other areas, which outstanding payments, social security that was not paid, etc., that might lead to €1 billion of arrears. The irony: the company is German.
Oh, that you couldn't write that.
That's fantastic. Anyway, other issues. Alex, there was a few. I think it was a year ago. Was it when the BA flight took off from London and had suddenly the engine kind of almost exploded or something?
Yeah, I believe it or not, it was 2 years ago. It was May 2013. It was a A319 going from Heathrow to Oslo, and it lost an engine very shortly after takeoff. And the captain did a phenomenal job of landing it. There were no injuries, and the plane made a safe landing. But it turns out that an issue that had been previously identified with the engine was sent in for maintenance, but the wrong engine was worked on, and so the problem was never addressed. And it was basically the cowling, the cover on the engine had been left undone, and that caused all kinds of problems, and there was never identified that the cowling was still unlatched when the plane take off the next day. So that's the worst part is
Yeah. I was about to say that. Go ahead.
that quote unquote several passengers said that they tried to tell the cabin crew that there was a substantial amount of fluid leaking from the right engine because the cowling hadn't been closed. But that information was never passed on to the flight deck, who I'm sure would have done something, i.e. not taken off. So that's a pretty worrying communication break. You had an experience with that, didn't you, Paul?
Yeah. Well, you were about to take off. It was, I think it was an Embraer. We're about to take off. So the passengers start shouting next to the engine that there was something leaking. He shouts so strongly that the flight attendant had to go and then called the pilot, stop the engines. We had to be dragged back to a parking position. We switched planes, etc. So, yeah, it was worth. I mean, I'm sure that if the pilot decided to stop and to change aircraft, the fact that the passengers saw it was not just to reassure the passengers, it was something actually going on.
Wow.
So yeah, exactly. Talking about, so when that BA flight came back, there was a lot of debris. I mean, the engine was almost falling apart when it was landing. And talking of falling apart, there's been very quickly a story that there's a part of a 777 fell over a Shanghai suburb like a week ago. Partly from Air France flight. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's not really a laughing matter because it's not every day that you have a big piece of of a Boeing 777 that just kind of decides to leave the aircraft and crash on a neighborhood.
Jeez.
Anyway, so the Boeing is asked to do reviews of all the aircrafts, obviously. Other story, I know we have a lot of story. Another story is Heathrow. So I don't know if you, Greg, you fly from Heathrow, but there's apparently going to be a third runway, although this is it will be done by 2080 if we look at the current number of positions. And Heathrow is not making it easier either, because Heathrow management basically said that, you remember the commission that said, okay, you'll have your third runway, said that to get your third runway, they had to promise to never build a fourth one. Heathrow doesn't want that. They had to stop flights from 11:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. Heathrow doesn't want that, and understandably so, because a lot of flights are coming in from Singapore or Hong Kong at a very early time in the day. So they say if we have to start only operations at 6 a.m., that we will lose business because of that. So basically, just to see that it's not going to be an easy fight, and we probably won't have any third runway in our lifetime. Another thing, though, that happened at Heathrow, and I don't know if you've seen that, guys, there were like some protesters that decided to go on the runway. I don't know if it was 27R, and they to just block it because they were saying, I think the name of the group is called Plane Stupid or something. Mm-hmm. And they were actually accusing planes to make a lot of problem with climate change. But did you agree with what they did? I mean, climate change is one topic that we can obviously, and we know planes have a big problem with it, but
what they did was dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous to themselves, dangerous to people on those airplanes that were trying to take off or land. There's better ways and safer ways to make your point. I don't think anybody would take these guys seriously after pulling such a crazy stunt.
But let's be honest, though. Although I agree with that statement you just said, there is clearly planes are becoming more fuel efficient, routes are becoming more fuel efficient, their biofuels are being tested, but there's still a problem with climate change.
Yeah,
I don't think it's the issue it's the way to act to block the runway for 7 hours. But there's still a problem. Going to the innovation part of the show to respond to these challenges of climate change. One of the solutions, one of the tests has been the solar impulse. That big, huge bird that is flying around the world with only batteries. It's a Tesla of the skies. Only that between Japan and Hawaii, which was its longest flight path, the batteries overheated and basically are rendered useless, and they have to replace them. So the flight is stuck. And worst of it is that they have to find a new funding of 20 million euros to replace them.
Wow. Those are some expensive batteries.
Yes, it's a bit sad because it's kind of a dream. We know it's very early in the days of having a full electrical plane, but it's the flight around the world has been stopped because, and I know that Picard, who's the main person in that program, has come back to Switzerland to try to find that money. to finish the round the world trip. But talking about another aircraft that is closer to being achieved is the Airbus E-Fan. That's something you saw, right, Alex, or not?
No, I haven't seen it in person. Someone was telling me they saw it at either Farnborough or Paris.
I've seen it at Farnborough. Yeah, I've seen it at Farnborough,
And then
but I've seen it from afar.
Noise.
Yeah, so apparently, this is a big story. We're not going to go into the details, but it's been the first electric plane that has crossed the channel. So the channel is between France and the UK. So that's a good thing, because the first electric plane. But apparently some French guy had another plane. It went guerrilla and flew the first plane before Airbus, and Airbus now is furious or something. I don't know the story. But anyway, so there's hope into electrical planes. But another plane you spotted, that's the one I wanted to see. You spotted a story about, I didn't know anything about it. What's the name of this? Kegel or something? What is that?
Burt Rutan's new airplane.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Because
so Burt Rutan is an aviation legend. He is a pioneer. There are not enough superlatives in the world to describe this man. He has designed and built and flown 75 different types of airplanes. Some of them have revolutionized the way that we fly, but they're so out there in their design, they look nothing like a standard airplane, almost all of them. So the very easy, the long easy, the boomerang, which had a kind of cantilevered wing that was a diagonal wing, quite difficult to describe. Voyager, which is now hanging in the National Air and Space Museum. The Spaceship One, which is what is eventually turned into Virgin Galactic. I mean, the man is revolutionary. Anyway, a couple of years ago, he retired because he couldn't get his medical clearance to fly anymore because he's 72 years old. So he retired and said, "I'm going to go live in Idaho." But about a week ago, he came out of the woodwork and said that he is designing his very last airplane, and it will be for his personal use, and it's called the Ski Gull. And some of the little details about this plane are extraordinary. It can take off and land on almost any surface: asphalt runway, grass, a rocky beach, water, including like heavy ocean swells, and snow. And that's also including salt water. And the way that it does it, it's got this kind of weird undercarriage. It's got a retractable wheel and ski combination, and with hydraulics built in, so it can absorb any undulating surface or landing on waves. It can take off in 430 feet of runway, which is incredible. It can also fly at 140 knots for 2,500 miles.
Wow,
it's just amazing. I mean, the guy is.
So he's building a single one, right?
He's building one just for himself. It's tandem seating for him and his wife.
Wow.
Just because he can. I mean, there was a wonderful documentary that the Discovery Channel did about 10 years ago, right when the Ansari X Prize was being contested. And I will post a link to it in the show notes. It's well worth going. The man is just a genius. Read this article. Go read everything you can find about Burt Rutan. He's an amazing guy.
Talking about documentaries, Greg, you've seen, I think Alex told me you've seen the documentary that is narrated by Harrison Ford.
Yeah, yeah, living in the age of airplanes.
So how is that?
It's great. Yeah, I mean, I think one review said it's an ode to aviation, and I think that really just sums it up quite nicely. It's beautifully shot. Cinematography is fantastic. There's some amazing shots, time-lapse shots of airports, of aerial photography, and it really focuses on not so much the mechanical aspect of flight, but more of the way that it's changed human society and the way we live, I think, more than anything. The thing it focuses on to begin with is looking at the average speed of humans over the time that we've existed, so the last 200,000 years, how fast we've been able to move, and just this ridiculous spike on that graph in the last century, really, where we've actually been able to exceed 5-6 miles an hour as like an average speed of locomotion, I guess. And it really just discusses, presents the way that aviation has helped shape the modern world in the last century or so. And it's great. It's just under an hour long. It's, as I said, just a visual masterpiece, really, that's just thoroughly enjoyable.
I'm not sure, Alex, if there's a release date in the UK yet.
They haven't announced anything yet, from what I can see.
Because you've seen the US, right?
Yeah, so it's in about 25 US theaters across the US in general. I saw it in New York, in Queens, at the New York Hall of Science. But it's a little bit sporadic in terms of where it's played. I think there's a few places in Canada as well, but in terms of Europe and outside of the US, they haven't yet announced anything as far as I know.
Oh, well.
Do you know that where they have it? On Emirates.
Oh, really?
No way.
Yeah.
No. Oh, God, these guys. I mean, I have to fly Emirates within the next 2 months to see it.
It is frustratingly difficult to find. I would love to see this film.
I mean, eventually it will arrive at a small screen. I mean, I think is it Discovery or
National Geographic?
Nat Geo. Nat Geo is helping it. So at some point, it will get on a channel. Though I'm sure it's good to see on a large screen because, like you just said, the cinematography looks pretty impressive. So. Yeah. I hope it comes to at least a few major cities in Europe, including the UK in London. We just mentioned the crazy plane from Alex, and then Emirates, which has also kind of other type of nice seating. And then there's this patent. There's the other story everybody's been talking about in the past 2 weeks. Is this new seat patent by what's the name of this French company?
Zodiac.
I forgot that. Zodiac. Thank you. Which created this kind of hexagon. So if you basically, in order to have more passengers per square feet in a plane, there's not much solutions at some point. So what they do now with that, it's only a patent, but they make it as you facing people one seat after the other. One seat is front facing, the other one is backward facing. The one front facing. So it's horrible.
It is awful. It just looks...
I mean, if you have your family in front of you, that's okay. But if you have to be for 8 hours in a flight, and I mean, the idea is since you don't have to be shoulder to shoulder, you can basically cramp more seats in the same area because, you can just, your feet take less space. But still, you have to awkwardly look at someone for the 8 hours in front of you. Oh, no way.
No. It's described in some of these articles as nightmarish.
I think it's important to have some space for your feet as well. I mean, I've got to move my feet out to the side. I usually get an aisle seat so I can stretch my legs out. I think that's kind of important as well. You can't cram your feet into a box and leave them there for 7 hours.
I mean, and you had a bad experience with that because you had a blocked.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
But also, I'm not sure if these patents take into account the fact that planes have to have an evacuation time in terms of accident that has to be very quick, because these layouts sometimes feel so complex that to escape, if you're on the window seat and there's a fire and you need to escape the plane very quickly, and then you have to go through like an old labyrinth to go out. I'm not sure the patent will ever come to reality. But anyway, this is just a patent, but that's one of the stories. The other story that was really, and I'm sure guys you've read it, the other story was a Rolling Stone feature of Ben Schlapping. Have you read that, guys?
Yeah.
I've been following Ben for a few years now. So he's that guy who basically lives the high life in planes. He's so good at understanding Air Miles program and how to get your frequent flyer miles that he's been living as an experiment for now almost a full year, basically only traveling first class around the world. But this feature is just out of this world because there's some stuff I knew, but like the fact that he was banned from United, stuff like that. I mean, you guys should really read it if you haven't. It's just would you do that, Alex? Would you go into, if you, let's say you had no family, no obligations, would you go so hardcore into trying to get all your deals and fly in first class all around the world?
I would love to. I don't know if I'm mathematically inclined enough to be able to spot the discrepancies and patterns that Ben is so adept at exploiting in a good way. I have friends that do and are very, very good at this, and who also happen to be, software engineers, and so they have the mind to kind of analyze large swaths of data and understand it. But yeah, I think it's why not? It's very cool.
Yeah, and there's been some commentary after this that, he's gaming the system. And I don't think he's actually gaming the system. He's just someone, besides being very smart about it, he's just someone that has basically, you and me, and Greg as well, we have some constraints when you take a flight. I cannot take a flight. Oh, there's a good deal in 2 hours at Heathrow. I've got to leave to, I don't know, Luanda. And then from Luanda, I'm going to Dubai. And then from Dubai, I'm going to Moscow. I wish sometimes I could have, that freedom, but we don't. As soon as you have a total freedom of your time and you can just go and hunt for the deals, of course, added with the smarts that he has in understanding the numbers, it's not even gaming the system. It's just like making that for a living. And I actually don't even think that airlines should be mad about it, because there are not that many. And if you look at his photography of most of the airlines, he has an account on Instagram which is pretty well followed. It puts the airline in a very good light, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty amazing. And the interesting fact, he's actually a millionaire out of this, because he out of his posts on his blog, I think he posts 6 times a day, etc. He's become a millionaire. Just not only he enjoys the high life in flying and being in first class, but also makes money out of it. So good for him. Very good for him. So do you track your miles religiously, Greg?
I really don't, to be completely honest.
But
get out of this show.
You do have some good strategies that I've actually picked your brains about the most efficient way to not have to be loyal to an alliance or an airline, but maximize your miles through things like, is it Starwood that you use, the Starwood card?
Yeah, so I pretty much pay for most of my own flights. They're not business flights, they're not usually work flights. So I'm usually constrained by cost. So I really just shop around for the best deals, and if the flight's £200 cheaper with a different airline, I'll generally do that. I'm not super loyal. So yeah, I've just been trying to find ways of being able to actually put all my points in certain pots without having to stick with a certain airline or grouping of airlines. So I've used Alaska for a while in the US, because they have, since they don't actually fly that many routes themselves, they're quite constrained to a smaller area. They have good partnerships with a lot of airlines, including Emirates. And
yeah, actually, to Ben Schlappig, if you read his blog, keeps mentioning Alaska as one of the good ways to make good deals.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, it's really useful. And then and outside that, as Alex mentioned, I use the Starwood Points program, SPG. I've rarely stayed in their hotels, I have to say. When I have, they've been great. I don't stay in hotels all that often, but I've actually amassed a lot of points through them, through credit cards and all that sort of thing. And they will transfer points 1-to-1 for miles with about 70 airlines. So
that's incredible.
If you have 30,000 points on your card and you want to put 20,000 on Emirates and 10,000 on AA, then you can just transfer them straight across 1-to-1.
Oh, that's actually very clever. Yeah. You see, I'm not that good. I do my calculation according to my loyalty, existing frequent flyer programs. Never thought about this. This is really good, because transferring miles can sometimes be very excessively expensive.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah, you don't pay anything, and they actually often will have deals where they'll actually give you extra miles for the transfer. So at the moment, they're doing like a 5,000 mile bonus. So if you transfer more than 20,000 out, they'll just throw another 5,000 in the pot, which is great. So yeah, no complaints with that.
I should totally look into that, Alex. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for the tip. It's actually very good. Talking about premium class, very quickly, because I know we don't have that much time. So BA has released is 7, because Alex flew BA like now 2 months ago already now. Time flies. Yeah. So, and you were kind of happy with that experience. BA has just released his, the 787 Dreamliner -9 layout, and they are keeping the first class, which is a sign, because you said earlier that the CEO from United said, international first class is to be ditched. Apparently, BA must know something and must have some routes when it's actually worth it because they're keeping the first class. It's going to be probably very similar to the first class you've experienced, Alex. That I've never experienced. I wish I will.
Looking at these pictures, it's actually not that different from what they have in their 747s.
Yep.
No, that's 10 years old. Oh, not 10 years old. Pardon me. 5 years old. They've got the same window blinds that I was so enamored with. It looks like the lighting controls and the remote are in the same place. It's just a refreshed version of an already what I thought was a very good product.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one. The other one, the other announcement this week was made, and I've obviously seen the designer, which is your get-to-go site if you want to know about premium, what happens in the front of the cabin. Swiss has just also released a few images of these 777-300 extended range ER. The first class looks really amazing. I really wanted
the whole cabin design looks pretty amazing. They did a great job with it.
I mean, I've flown only once I was lucky to fly once business class long haul on Swiss, and it was okay. I mean, the design was good in terms of the way it looks, but the actual experience, me being 6'4", so 195.5 centimeters, was kind of okay-ish because it was not fully flat beds. I would fall anyway. I'll talk about that another day. But this looks much better, and that's something I wish I can do one day. And talking about business and premium products, Greg has done something that is very interesting to me because you've actually flown La Compagnie. So La Compagnie, for those who don't remember, we talked about it a few times, is this airline who flies from Paris to the US. It's an old business seating plane. How is that?
That was great, I have to say. Yeah, pretty much nothing but positive things to say. So I came across La Compagnie through your podcast, however many episodes ago that was.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so it really came about through, I had a flight, fairly short notice, to New York this summer. Alex well knows that I really despise the price hikes that airlines enforce over the summer. An example, summer last year, I flew BA Heathrow and Newark for around 450 GBP. 2 months, this was pre-summer, May at some point. Midsummer, the price had gone up to £900, exactly the same route.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
So I was really looking for ways to avoid paying £800, £900 for a flight this summer, or at least make my money worth it, because I'm really not a huge fan of paying a huge amount more for the same experience. And in my searches, I found La Compagnie, who have recently started flying London Luton. Well, London's arguable, but Luton to Newark, which is also billed as being New York, which is obviously arguable itself, but still relatively convenient. And they have, I think they have 3 sets of pricing. No, 4. Sorry, they have promo, Best Buy, semi-flex, and full flex that go up in price from promo to full flex, obviously. And I found that the promo prices, which actually suited the days I wanted to fly, were cheaper than equivalent major airline economy. So Virgin, BA, etc., were around £900 for a return flight for about a 2-week period, June, July, and La Compagnie was $798 it came out to on their promo price. So it was really a no-brainer. If I was going to spend that money, which it's still a lot of money to spend, but if I was going to spend it, I really wanted to make the most of it. So,
and how was inside? How was the experience inside?
So they fly 757s, which actually it's a little bit strange being in a narrow body transatlantic. I don't think I've ever been in one otherwise for that sort of distance. The interiors, the actual plane interior itself is a little bit worn and aged, but the La Compagnie fittings are great. So they're obviously billed as economy version of business, and that's exactly what it was. It was, you have the space that is really what you want when you're paying that money. That's really the benefit. The seats aren't full lie flat, but they're super comfortable. I was quite happy just to sleep the entire way back. The service was great. The food was great. I mean, far better than most economy flights. certainly not. I've flown Emirates Business once. It wasn't certainly up to that standard. But then again, when you look at the prices compared to what you pay on Emirates
It's incredible,
for the equivalent distance, I mean, this was really amazing value, and staff and service were great. And it really just seemed like this is how flying should be. It was enjoyable again.
Wow. I honestly was not expecting such a positive feedback when you told me that you were flying on these guys. So I'm delighted to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of trepidation. I have heard they've had issues with availability of aircraft. I mean, I think they have 5 aircraft, I may be wrong, but somewhere around 5 that serve the Paris to New York and London Luton to New York routes. And they do have some maintenance issues just with having such a small fleet. We did have a mechanical issue with one of the spoilers on the way out from Luton that delayed us for an hour or so, but we actually dealt with that really well. And I mean, I was comfortable. I had tons of legroom. I had the goods. IFE, they have Samsung Galaxy tablets with the entire James Bond collection. So
there you go, Paul. That's a reason for you.
That's
to
for
fly.
me. Was the staff French or British?
It was a mixture, but mostly French. From what I could understand, both captains we had were British. There's 3 cabin crew. I think on the first flight, 2 were French and 1 was British, and on the way back, the 3 of them were French. They spoke good English. The staff at the airports were really helpful. They had extra staff there just to make sure everything went smoothly. You had access to the lounge in Luton, which it's Luton, so you can't have too high expectations. But it was fine. It was nice to be out of the buses of the airport itself. And Newark lounge is pretty good.
There's one thing here, one remark that is very interesting overall. What I'm reading you is that, and that's maybe why, Alex, you just said that you were not expecting something so positive, is that a lot of the reviews that we've been reading about La Compagnie are made by people who tend to fly premium all the time. So when you tend to fly Emirates and Qatar and whatever, and you suddenly fly La Compagnie, for you it's kind of a step down, because if you're okay to pay prices or are very good at playing with your miles to be at La Résidence or something, then obviously when you have a product which resembles what premium products used to be 10 years ago, you're like, well, it's okay. You know, I have a tablet Galaxy and I don't have like a massive LCD screen or something. But that's maybe not how we should look at it. We should look at it like, hey, you can fly with a premium product that might not be, of course, these lavish Singapore seats or something, but that is a very competitive pricing, and it offers an entirely new perspective on how to fly. Like you said, it's the right way to fly, Greg. So it's interesting because I tend to believe that a lot of people, if they had access, if they would try that, they would find the product actually fantastic. And maybe the reviewers are, blasé with, having champagne and caviar and what else. And so maybe that's the reason why.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think, the obvious difference in price, if you look at an equivalent business class flight that's going to be 3 times the cost, then sure, it's not going to compare because that's just not possible. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're just trying to give you a better flight experience for a budget. And they really succeeded, I have to say. I sat down in my seat and I had to grin a little bit because this is what I've been dreaming of is a way to fly that I can realistically afford. I'm not going to fly with them 5-6 times a year like I usually do.
No, of course not, but still.
If I can do 1 trip instead of 2 or 3 trips to New York, then yeah, if I've got a little bit of spare money, I will absolutely pay for this again. It was just so refreshing. And we were actually told on the return journey that we were going to be about an hour early on arrival. And that was just, it was the first time I felt I really don't want to be early because I just enjoy being able to sleep. So I thought, damn it, I could sleep for 5 hours instead of 4 if we went early.
Alex, we should try that.
I think we should. I think we owe it to ourselves.
We owe it to ourselves to try that. Now, honestly, it looks so interesting. I'm sure I would like it. But talking about that, so this designer is running currently. Our friends there are running a passenger choice award or something. So if you want to vote for your favorite airline, so you guys can do that. You have until August 4th. This is not related to premium product. It could be anything, but what is for you the best airline you've flown in 2015? You just go, the link will be on our show notes, but I think it's worthwhile seeing what they've got. They've also done a ranking that's their own ranking of what they consider the best business class. And not surprisingly, Etihad is number one, Singapore is number two, and Qatar is number three, which is why I kept mentioning those in the past segment. BA is actually number seven, so it's not all right, because there's not a single American, of course, airline. I don't think Emirates is there either. So it's a pretty strong argument. I think we're gonna switch now to the airport of the week, but before that, I want to ask Greg another question. Is that you had a very story at the beginning about your blood clot, so that was a sad story. But are there any type of stories, of flying stories or airport stories that you keep? And maybe not the one you just mentioned with La Compagnie, but that is something that stands out for you, maybe as a kid or later. Is it really something that a particular flight, something that really stands out for you?
Yeah, I think there's a clear winner, and it was my second trip to the US. I was 11 or 12, I think I was. It was a BA 747, and I was invited up to the cockpit by the pilot, and that was just pretty special. I spent about 10 minutes in the cockpit. He talked me through the controls. And I remember distinctly how he described to me coming into land, I believe it was in Hong Kong, and how he was describing the way that thunderstorms looked from the air and how they were kind of all stacked up on his approach to Hong Kong. And that really stuck with me, just the way that he described those. And I mean, I love watching thunderstorms from planes. I know, Alex, you had some pretty amazing thunderstorm action a few weeks back in the US.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite bits of flying, staring out the window. And I always, when I see a thunderstorm, I always think back to those 10 minutes in that 747 in the cockpit.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So you're a window guy as well, right?
Actually, less so with my leg. I have to try and get up and move. But yeah, I love the window seat. I can just stare out of it. I don't need an IFE when I've got a window seat.
Yeah, and be smarter than Alex, because when you choose a window, you should it's actually a window. No, we all window. I mean, that's really, Alex, you said it a few episodes ago. It's really said that access to cockpit is so restricted now, especially for kids, because I think all of us have a memory of being in a cockpit. I think I even did, I think it was a landing, but I was in a cockpit for a landing. I mean, come on. You kind of beat that as a memory. Even if you don't end up being a pilot, don't end up being a creator of a podcast on airline of aviation podcast, it's still something pretty unbelievable. So
absolutely,
it's a bit sad. Have you ever guys been talking about that to Rio?
No, I have not. No.
You really should, first of all, because it's one of the most wonderful cities I've ever been to. I used to go quite a lot, actually, working with a few startups there up to maybe 2 years ago. And so I wanted to choose an airport that was that didn't require me to do a lot of talk, because we already talked a lot. And so the airport is, well, let's say it's not that great, right? So it's a bit sad, because the city is a postcard. It's one of the most beautiful cities I've seen. It's with this huge, like hills in the middle. It's really like you see in the movies. It's really incredible, And then the airport, which is the first thing, of course, you get. There's two airports actually in Rio. The other one is a domestic one. We'll cover it one day, because you have the best views when you land there. But this one is next to the sea, a bit like the one in Hong Kong, for instance. But sadly, it's not up to the standards of Hong Kong. It looks like really bad. They were supposed to make it better for the World Cup, the Football World Cup in 2014. They kind of did a little bit. Now they actually still trying to make it better, because, as you know, there will be the Olympics in 2016 as well, but it's still not there. So basically, first thing, if you ever go to Rio, don't expect anything good at the airport. Second, be very early, because it's a mess. Actually, we were talking about the lines at JFK. The lines there are just also messy, and not because it's difficult to enter, just because there's just not enough of them, and they're like in small wooden boxes. I'm not kidding. You have wooden boxes for immigration, and that actually slows the whole process down. So they're making improvements. Terminal 2 has been kind of almost fully renovated. Terminal 1 is not, but basically do not expect a lot of things. It's open 24 hours a day, so you can technically have a layover there, though I wouldn't particularly tell you to have to sleep in the airport because you have Rio, next to it, which is kind of nicer than staying in the airport. So that's maybe why you shouldn't. It's pretty easy to go to the city as well. One tip: there are two types of cabs. The cabs that are, if I remember, blue, and the cabs that are yellow. The blue ones are the executive cabs, and the yellow are the ordinary ones. So basically, there's a price difference. Know that because when you step out of the airport, it's such a mess. Everybody shouts, honking all over the place, that you might end up with a blue and paying more. Maybe it's actually better because they're air conditioned, but maybe it's not actually really worth the price. So there you go. That's what I wanted to say. Oh yeah, for plane spotters, for you, Greg, the photographer. If you want to take pictures of planes or the runway, there are two spots that are kind of nice. In Terminal 1, there's something called the Air Cafe. You can see the parking spots of the planes as part of the runway. And in Terminal 2, that's the international. On the Concourse 1, you can also see views of the parking, the gates, some of the aprons, etc. And a very good spot. And even I think you can go even if you're not ticketed. So if you're not a passenger, there's a corridor between Terminal 1 and 2, to walk between them. From that part, you can see, actually make it look good, a lot of cool plane spotting if you into that type of thing. So that was for Rio. So I hope that when we redo an episode in 2016, I'll be able to redo Rio and to tell you that now it's a great airport. Because for the moment, it's sad because actually I have a lot of friends there. They complain about it, the fact that it's really not the image we should give about, this magnificent city and having such a messy airport. So it's not the greatest experience in the world. Greg, before I thank you, I want to, is there, this is the question I asked to a lot of guests, is there anything besides flying business all the time? Is there anything, if you had the power to change one thing about the experience of air travel, what would it be? A single thing. It could be anything.
I think probably the thing that stresses me out the most is just the unpredictability of it. And that has something to do with airlines in terms of, is your carry-on going to get accepted or not? That sort of thing. But what can you bring through security? Depending on the airport and the mood of the person you speak to. It seems that everything is still so variable that even though I've visited airports dozens of times throughout the year, I'm always second-guessing myself as to how I pack, what I pack. And that really just is probably the most stressful part of it. I mean, it doesn't keep me up at night, but it just seems like that's something that would be nice to figure out. I know it's kind of dull. It's not really something super interesting.
No, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense because I have that kind of issue as well all the time. And I've run into airports like you said, suddenly something that was good in one just said, yeah, well, this is not okay. I'm like, what?
Yeah, what do I've flown with this 10 times. I've never had an issue. And now you're telling me that it's a problem.
That's infuriating.
Should we crowdsource something and do it would be nice to have just a wiki of, everybody that travels just puts on every airport, this was okay, this was not, this was okay, this was not. Because sometimes I wish there was some kind of information central where I could know that in advance, because it just doesn't make any sense sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We should absolutely do that. Oh, that, guys, any closing words? Alex, Greg?
No, I think this has been great. Greg, thank you so much for joining us.
No, that's quite all right. There's actually one thing I forgot to mention. Just coming back to La Compagnie really quickly. I didn't actually mention they have started a frequent flyer program as well. It's really recent. So they do their own program. And I only found this out today. I think I had an email from yesterday. They give you 10 points as a welcome gift. And you only need 20 points for a free one-way ticket. So that's quite generous.
What? No way.
So you get a set number of points based on the class of ticket you buy. So the promo, the cheapest is 1 point, all the way to full flex, which is 5 points. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 5 for the ticket brackets.
But that means 2 full flex. You mean return, or you mean a single flight?
That's 1 point per flight for promo and 5 points per flight for full flex.
So basically, you do a return flight, full flex, and you have a free flight
with the
because you have 10 points.
You have a free one-way flight. I mean, the full flex is expensive for obvious reasons. But I mean, even then, it's a really generous deal as well.
No, it's actually mind-boggling because even though it's expensive, I mean, in general, it might be as expensive as a business class in other like a traditional business class, but the traditional business class you won't get a free flight to a certain like you have to wait a freaking long time. That's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they're just
That's
announced.
confidence in their product.
Oh yeah, that's confidence in their product, exactly. Or maybe I don't. Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
so
Alex, we clearly have to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, I really hope they stick around. Like I said, I was impressed. So long may they be around, and I hope they can change things up in the industry a little bit as well.
What's your next destination with a plane? Do you already know that?
Copenhagen first thing tomorrow morning, super early, and then Faroe Islands Friday morning.
Wow.
Faroe Islands. Oh, how do you get there?
Copenhagen.
Oh, that's
Not
why.
with
Okay,
Ryanair.
yeah, well, well, I hope not. Well, you, Alex, are you flying this week?
Not this week. At the end of the month, I'm flying to Geneva.
Oh, true. I was there actually last week. Yeah, actually, that's true. But yeah, I'll give you a few tips for Geneva then. I mean, although you have our episodes about it, but I'll give you a few tips.
Nice.
For me, my next will be Dublin, but that's only beginning of August. We might have another episode until then. So, guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you somewhere in an airport.
All right. Happy flying.
Thanks.
On behalf of Layovers and the entire crew, we would like to thank you for joining us on this podcast today, and we're looking forward to seeing you on board again next week. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.